Okay, so we are continuing our tutorials on functions. So we have done a recall. So after this recall, I think you could go through the previous video if you haven't gone through the recall video. So now we are going straight to functions. Let me, okay. So now functions helps us to what? Avoid, helps us to avoid writing the same code over and over and over again. Now, let's look at the syntax of a function. You know, let's recall math. Okay, what are functions in math? Okay, now example, in math, okay, that's let me make it bolder. Let's say in math we could say function of x is equal to x plus 1. In this case, if x is 3, if let's say, okay, x is 2, it means function of 2 is 2 plus 1 is equal to 3. So the same concept applies in programming. Just like how much we have function of x is equal to x plus 1. Okay, so in this case, if we decide to put function of 2, it will be 2 plus 1, which is equal to 3. So the same thing applies. Not the same though, sorry, but similar. Now, the function syntax, let's quickly look at how the syntax of a function looks like. Okay, W3 schools didn't write it, but let's quickly have a look at how. Okay, so the function, so you first define the function. So this is a keyword, define. Let me do it this way so that we can have a multi-line comment. Let's rather do it a multi-line comment. So let's say we first start with the keyword define. Okay, then the name of the function, and there's something called parameters, which I am going to explain. It's similar to this, just like how we have f of x. This x is similar to the parameters. So everywhere, anything we put here will be replaced by the actual thing. Okay, so then we have our block of code here. Then we can decide to return a value or not to return a value. Now let me explain this. This may seem confusing, but whatever code we want to avoid repeating it over and over and over again comes here. Then if we want to return a value, thus we want to assign it to a variable. Assuming we want to assign our function to a variable. So example, let's use the mass example. Assuming, okay, after we have a parameter here. So let's say the function, okay, this is our function. This is our function name, just like the math. This is our parameter. Okay, this is our parameter. So let's say now let me come here and explain it to you with a mass example. So we could say define. Okay, so our function name, then our parameter is x. Okay, then let's say we want to run let's say y is equal to x plus 1, then we can then decide to return what? Y. Now, this is example of what I have written here. Like we are trying to relate the mathematical concept to the programming. Okay, so we have our function of x. Then we come to write a code. Let's say y should be equal to x plus 1. So what happens is that anytime, so this x can be replaced with any value, and any value x is used to replace would be the value here. So after defining our function, so first of all, in functions, that's programming, we have to define it. Okay, so this is our definition. Then after we define our function, we have to call our function by just writing the function name and something we called arguments. Now, just like maths, okay, this is going to be the parameters. X is going to be our parameter, and then 2 will be our argument. So this one will be our parameter, and then this 2 would be what? Our argument. Okay, so it's just like we defined the function here. This is the definition, and then this calling of the function. Calling. So it's a similar concept in programming. So just like how we define our function here, okay. So we have f of x in maths, okay. So this is our definition, okay, which probably has a parameter x, okay. Then when we want to use the function, we place in an argument of 2. That's that it is going to replace 2 in our x in our function, which can even return a value, okay. So let me clear this. I just wanted you to relate it to maths, how the maths works. So we first create a function of x, which x is our parameter. Then we pass in an argument of 2. Okay, so when you hear parameters, arguments, don't let it confuse you. So argument is at the calling stage. When we decide to call our function, we just pass in an argument into our function. So this is actually, this whole code is when we are defining our function, and this whole code is when we are calling our function. That's, we have to place in an argument. So now let's look at our example here. So assuming we want to call our function, we can then say function 2, meaning this 2 would replace the x here. So it will then be what? Y is equal to 2 plus 1, which is going to give us what? 3. So it is actually, so actually this one will actually give us what? Will return 3, because x will be replaced by 2, and then 2 plus 1 is what? 3. So y is equal to 3, and then we are returning a value of 3. Now we can decide not to return a value. It's not compulsory to return a value. Now we only return a value, okay. We only return a value when we want to, if we want to assign the value to a variable. That's when we return a value. Okay, but if you are not really interested in assigning it, there's no need. Now, let me explain deeper. But up to this point, I want you to get the calling. That's every function we have to define and we have to call. Note, we have to define and then we have to call. This is the definition, how the syntax looks like, and this is the calling. Okay, so let's say we can now function name can have any name. Example, instead of naming a function name here, we can say adding like addition. So in this case, addition would be the name of our function. X is our parameter. We are returning Y. So when calling the function, we have to say addition 2. That's 2 would replace the X here. So Y is equal to X plus 1, which is going to give us Y. Now this may sound, oh, why we need this, but this can really save you a time and reduce the number of lines of codes you have to write by just passing parameters into the code. Now, let's so up to this point, I think let's go further. Now, this thing you have done, okay, you can decide to return a value or not. Now, let's go through practical example and let's see. Now, I am leaving the comments. So, now let's start. Okay, so like I always said, we have to define our function. So, definition. Okay, then we are saying we are adding addition or or maybe add number. Okay, now we have our parameter x. We can have the names of the parameter doesn't matter. It shouldn't be x, y. Just like how variables are, we can have actual names depending on what the parameter is going to store. Okay, so let's say we are returning x plus y. Okay, now let's first take an example which doesn't return. Okay, let's say we don't want to return any value. So we just don't put any return there because we are not interested in assigning it to a variable. So there's no need to put a return there. Okay, then we can come and call our function here. That's add number. Then we can say 3. Okay, now if we run our code, you are going to see we have 4 here. Cause what? This 3 replaces x. So x becomes 3. So y is equal to 3 plus 1, which gives us 3. So we are printing 3 inside our terminal. We have gone through output, so I believe you understand what print y means. Okay, now let's replace it with 8. Okay, the same way 8 goes into this, so y is equal to 8 plus 1. So print y is equal to what? 9. Now, alternatively, we could return it. Okay, let's say return y. Okay, in that case, we can come and have a variable here. Let's say z is equal to add number 2, then print z. Okay, now if we print it, you are going to see that we got what? 3, cause 2 went into the function here. Y is equal to 2 plus 1, we which is 3. So we returned y, which is 3. So because we have a return statement here, we can assign this function to a variable, and that variable we assigned it to would hold the value of 3 here. That's the variable we assign the function to would hold whatever the value we return. Please note, this is the key difference. Okay. Now, so now we know the difference. Now let's try this and see. When we took out the return, we got none. Let me delete this. Delete this. Let's run it again. You are going to see that when we take out the return, we get none because we are not returning any value. So anytime you want to assign it to a variable, you have to return it. Okay, so return y, then we get what? 3. That's one thing you have to note. So at this point, I believe you know what a function name is. That's every function should have a name because you are definitely going to call it after you have defined it here. You definitely have to call it. So every function should have a name. Then a function can have a parameter or not. Okay, it's not compulsory. But if you want to pass argument into a function, then it should have a parameter to hold the function. Okay, so in this case we have a parameter x. Now note example, this in W3 schools has no parameter because they are not interested in passing any argument into it. Their function is just to do some things. It's not compulsory a function should have a parameter. But if you want to pass certain data into your function, then that function should have parameters which can hold the data. Okay, this is a quick overview. I decided to rush it, but it's not compulsory for your function to have a parameter, just like how we have here in W3 schools. This is fine. They define a function here. That function just prints hello from a function, and then they called it here. Okay, that's perfectly fine. But if you want to pass data into your function, then it has to have arguments. I won't go deep into arguments because I want this to be as a basis of understanding. Um, this we have named arguments, keyword arguments, amongst others. What we actually did here is, I think, named argument or so. But we have arbitrary arguments, we have keyword arguments. The whole thing is that we are passing data into them. You can browse through them, but the most popular is keyword argument, which now let me try to explain something with keyword argument. So let's have x and y. Okay. Now so okay. Now I just want to explain something to you with keyword argument. Okay. Now before I explain that, let me um first use the name the argument. I think this named argument like the normal way of writing. Okay, so now example, we have a function that adds two numbers, x and y. Okay, Sorry, so this should be maybe z or something. So then we can return z. Okay. Then let's say addition is equal to addition maybe is equal to, okay, then let's print addition here. um I believe you know about variables output, so I wouldn't go through basic things. Now let's say we say 2 comma 3. Okay, now let's run this. We are going to see that x is 2, y is 3, z is equal to x plus y. So 2 plus 3 is equal to what? 5. So we return 5. We assign the 5 to a variable here, and then we printed it inside the terminal, which is this 5. Now note, this is what I want you to get. Now, after we pass 2 and 3 here, x is what? 2. Y is what? 3. This is because this follows the same order. 2 would be assigned to x, then 3 would be assigned to y. But what if we don't want to follow that order? That's where the keyword argument comes in. So we could rather say that, oh no, y is rather 2 and then x is rather equal to y. This is what we call the keyword argument. Okay, we have said now no, y is rather 2, x is equal to 3 instead. So now if we try to run, you are going to see that instead of x being 2, x is rather 3, and then y is 2, cause we what? Passed in a keyword argument. There are so many forms of argument. I wouldn't go through, they are self-explanatory. You can read about them. Example, arbitrary arguments. If you do not know how many arguments you are going to pass into a function, just use star before the parameter name. So this one, it means you can pass in any number of arguments you want. Okay, so it will look something like this. That's here we are sure that, oh, we have exactly two arguments here we are going to pass values into. But what if we don't know the number of arguments? Then in that case, we have to, you know, use the star word. You can go deep into it later. Um arbitrary plus keyword argument. If you do not know exactly how many number of words, blah blah blah, that's you want to pass it as keywords, not as the normal way of passing, but as keywords. Then you have to use double star, and then you don't know the number of arguments you want to pass inside. Also, you could have a default parameter. Let me explain that one quick, because that one too is part of the basics. With a default parameter, let's say we just pass 3. This throws an error. Clear let me run it again. This throws an error because it is expecting two arguments. You have passed in only one. It is expecting x and y. You passed in just one. It is confused. Is it x? Is it y or what? It doesn't know. Okay, so that's where the like default parameters comes in. Okay, so we could say that, okay, um so we could say that, okay, if nothing is passed, x should be equal to 0. If nothing is passed, y2 should be equal to 0. Okay, so then we can now pass in our argument. So now when because we have placed in default parameters, okay, it passed this 3 into x. So x has a value, but y has no value because we placed in just one argument. So it will automatically assign 0 to y. So so that's why x is equal to 3, y is equal to 0. In that case, it doesn't throw an error like what it did here. Okay, so at times you could place in default arguments to, so when the number of arguments can be less than the parameters, it's best to place in the default argument. Let's try something quick here too as well. Instead of passing it as just an argument, let's pass it as a keyword argument. Y is equal to 3. Then run it. So you are going to see that the 3 was assigned to y, but because we passed in just one value, 3, it means x has no value. So it's just going to use the default value, which is 0. So 3 plus 0 is 3, and that's what we've printed. So just read about it. There are so many, concepts. Return values is what I told you about. That's if we want to assign it to a variable, we have to return it. Now, pass through is another important thing. Um, Pass is simply the function should do nothing. Normally, if you create a function afresh, let me just do something like this. Okay. Now, if you create a function, okay, it throws an error because we haven't completed our function. But at times you just want to have the function there and then probably work on it later. In such a case, you am just placing pass. So this would avoid the error. Thus, it should just pass. Later, I am going to work on it. Okay. So that's the advantage of pass. Cause if you don't add pass, it will throw an error. But maybe you don't want to work on the function now. You just want to create it down. Later you would come and work on it or something like that. It is not only that at times do we intentionally pass, but those ones we are going to go through later. But the whole concept is if you don't want to finish writing your function, to avoid it throwing an error, just put pass so you don't need to complete your function. Because a function should have this structure, it should have a definition and then a block of code. But where you don't want to put in any block of code for now, just put in pass and it wouldn't give you any error. But without any block of code and without a pass statement, it is going to give you an error. So the positional argument is what I told you about the normal one. Instead of, so it's either a positional argument or a keyword argument. You can read more about it, but these are the basic concepts. Okay. So up to this point, I believe you have a firm grip of functions. That this is just to explain to you how function works. But we are now going to go deeper into it, okay, and see the real use of a function. So we are going to do a simple program that actually computes your taxes for you. That's your pay as you earn taxes. That's your individual tax. Okay, so now let's start. So application of function, application of function. Okay. Now we know that first of all, you have to define a function and what? Call the function. Call the function. That's you define function and call function. Okay. Secondly, we also need know that it may have a parameter or no parameter. That's fine. It may also have a return value or no return value. I explained parameters that parameters and arguments. I explained parameters and arguments. So parameters slash arguments, and then it may have no parameter or argument. And then, so these are the basics of it, but you can go ahead for positional argument, um, positional keyword argument, default values. All those things are just extension of this basic concept. Okay, so now we are going to create our today we are going to create a program that helps in tax computations. So now, first of all, like I told you, we want to run in an indefinite loop. Okay, that we want the block of code to run over and over and over till when we tell it to stop. I explained several ways you can achieve that. Okay, we are going to use while true. Okay, while true. Okay, so while true, let's print some few things inside the terminal. Okay, while true, let's print tax computation s- software. Then maybe let's leave uh select enter. Let's say enter, let's say 1 to compute PAYE to compute individual income tax. Enter 2 to compute corporate tax. Enter 3 to quit. No, not corporate tax. Take home pay. Then okay, no, let's just make it simple. Enter 2 to compute individual income tax backwards. Okay, so let's okay, so now while true, we want the software to do this. Let's align it clearly so that it can be visioned clearly, so that normally So this is our tax computation software. Let's run it and see how it looks like. Okay, it is running into an indefinite loop. You see, so this is what I was talking about. Indefinite loops. It is running over and over and over because we didn't put in a break statement. Okay, so let's put in a break statement before so we can see. Okay, so when we run it, after placing in the break statement, it just runs this. Okay, tax computation software. Um, let's bring this one here so it looks more nicer. Okay, so let's run it and see. Okay, tax computation. Let's leave some space here. Okay, let's run it. Okay, this one looks more presentable. Tax computation software. So now from there, we go to the next concept. Okay, so let's say user input. Okay, user input. Okay, let's say enter choice or something like that. So the user would either enter 1, 2, 3. Okay, now let's see what happens. So enter a choice 1. Okay, good. Our program has ended. Okay, it looks well. So now back to the same concept. Let's print whatever the user entered. So let's say print user input. Okay. Let's say user entered 1. User entered 1 plus user input. Okay. So let's see. So 1, user entered 1. Okay. User entered 1. Let's see. Let's see 2. User entered 2. Enter your choice 2. User entered 2. Okay. So choose an option looks more professional than enter your choice. Okay, so now we are building our console application gradually. Okay, so now we know that when the user enters something, the value comes. So there's no need to print it back into the terminal. Now, so if user enters 1, that's if user input is equal to 1, that's if the variable here is 1, that's if what the user entered is 1, what should happen? Okay, if what the user entered is 1, let's say we are computing so maybe basic salary. Okay, so basic salary, we would need the user's input again. Is equal to, okay, enter your basic salary. Okay, now you can see float here because whatever we use input for, input returns a string. Input returns a string. So anytime input returns a string, now anytime you hover over a function, you can see what it returns. Input returns a string. So whatever we get here is a string. But we can't use string for computations, that's text. We have to convert it to number, that's a float. That's so to do that, we have to put this whole thing into floats. Remember casting. If you don't remember, you can go back to casting. In W3 schools, it explains casting into details, like casting from one variable to the other. So we are just casting. So whatever we get from the user should be casted into a float. Okay, the basic salary we got from the user should be casted into a float. Okay, now what else do we need? Okay, maybe tax rate. Okay, let me just say salary because tax computations differ from country to country. Okay, then let's say tax rate. Okay, let me see. Okay, we can have our tax rate outside this function. Okay, so just right after here, we can have our tax rates. Let's say it's a flat tax rate. Control Z. Okay, so let's say our tax rate is, let's say, 0.2. Okay, to make things simple, we shouldn't have graduating tax rate. Okay, so after the if the user enters 1, okay, it means the like user wants to compute his individual income tax. Okay, now, so what we are going to do is that we have to what? Multiply the salary by the tax rate. So tax amount is equal to this plus this. Then we improperly print your tax amount is tax amount. I believe these are basic things, so I wouldn't go much deep. So plus tax amount. Okay. Now, if the user enters 2, okay, no, that's not what I want. Okay, so if the user enters 2, the user should enter net income rather. Then if that is the case, if the user enters net income, therefore salary his salary would be equal to net income. If user enters salary, his salary uh, net income divided by, so no, sorry, this net income, so divided by 1 minus tax. Okay. So if its net income is divided by 1 minus tax, so his tax amount will be the salary times tax. This is basic. So if you have no knowledge in backwards computation of tax, that's how to compute tax backwards. Okay. So so your salary is this, your tax amount is this. Okay. Okay. Now let's see if it works out. Print your net income is salary minus tax amount. Okay. So we would need to put in a break here, then also put in a break here. Now, then else if user input is equal to 3, no wait, I don't think we need a break here, but rather if user input is equal to 3, then we break. Else print invalid option. Okay, so now we are done with our if statement. If you don't understand what we just did, just go through if then else. You would hopefully understand. So this basically our function. Okay, now let's test this. This sorry, this is not a function. This is our code, which doesn't involve function here. I am going to use this to explain functions. You are going to realize we are computing our tax here and here. We are only fortunate this is actually a one-line code. But assuming we were doing a graduating rate, this this could have been like 4 or like 10 lines of code. But just because we are making it simple, that's why the tax amount is just a line of code. Now, what we are going to do is that after everything, instead of having this, we are going to replace this with a function. Okay, now let's run it. Okay, so let me make it bigger. So it says tax software. Enter 1 if we want to compute individual tax, 2 if we want to compute backwards, 3 if we want to quit. So let's say we enter 1. Okay, enter our salary 1,000. You can't concatenate string and float. Okay, so that is the same casting issue. So whatever we got here is actually a float. So because we can't concatenate it, we can just convert it, cast it back to string. Okay, then cast this one to string. Okay, then cast this one to string. Then cast this one to string. Okay, because we can't add a string and a float. So let's do it again. We have it here. So let's select our option one and see, enter our salary 1,000. So your tax amount is 200. Your net income is what? $800. Okay. Now it is asking us. So now this time around, let's choose option two. Now our net income, let's rather type 800 there to see if our formula works. So option two, enter your net income 800 instead. So our salary is 1,000 and then our tax amount is 200. So our logic works. Okay, now this is just a logic to explain something. Now let's come to our actual function. Okay, the whole concept is that this and this is actually the same. Now, let's say we are doing graduating rates. Maybe after this example, we are instead of using a flat rate of 0.2, we are going to use a graduating rate to explain better. But assuming we are using a graduating rate, it is going to involve a whole lot of code. Okay, so now instead of doing this, we could put it in a function. So let's say define, okay, compute tax. Tax rate is equal to 0.2. Tax amount is equal to salary times tax. And then we return the tax amount. So whatever the user enters as a salary, okay, whatever we pass in as a salary, let me scroll this down. So this is our formula. So now let's clear tax rates. Okay, now we just come here and do compute tax into bracket salary. Let me user salary. So let me use user salary so it doesn't confuse you. You are going to get the difference. So this is the argument. So whatever we retrieve from the user here, we save it in a variable and pass the variable as our argument. So this salary is going to replace this user salary. So tax amount is 0.2. So, sorry, tax is 0.2. Tax amount is user salary times tax. This user salary, we have passed salary as an argument here. So this user salary would be whatever the salary value is. That's whatever the user entered times our tax rate of 0.2. Then we return the value. Okay. So to make things simple, we just assign it to our what? Tax amount. Okay. I told you if you want to assign a value, you have to return it. If you want to assign the value of the function to a variable, you have to return it. So we just return our tax amount. Okay. The same way, the same thing goes here. Okay, tax amount is equal to compute tax salary. Okay, now we have a problem. We have cleared tax from here. Okay, so let me pause it. Just a minute. Okay, sorry, I just had to do something quickly. I'm back. Um, so now we have an issue here, salary. Okay, now tax is not defined. Okay, so Now let's recall. Okay, we first learned that first of all we need to define a function, which we've done here. We are calling here. Okay, those are basic concepts we learned. This is an argument we are passing into this parameter. This is also an argument we are passing into this parameter. We are returning the value, we are assigning it to a variable. Okay, now let's, programming is all about creativity. So let's think about something smart. Okay, so comma. Now let's have a default value of net income. Net income is equal to 0. Okay, now, so I just want us to clear this thing here. So this more of creativity. This not about functions. Okay, so now we could do this kind of computation in this one by passing net income to into our function. However, since we are using this function in option 1, which has no net income, so it's best to have a default value of 0 for net income. So if the user chooses option 1, our default value for net income would be 0. But if the user chooses option 2, then our default value wouldn't stand again. We are actually going to have a value for net income. So with that, we can quickly put this code here. Okay. Now, let's try something and see. This about creativity. Okay, so we pass net income here. Okay, so let's try this and see if it will work. Salary. You know, let's try this and see if it will work. So, yeah, I think it should work, but let's try. Okay, but the whole concept is that, okay, instead of like assuming the the income tax computation is so complex, okay, not a flat rate, but it's very complex. It means we are going to repeat the same complex code in both option 1 and then option 2. But in this case, we have created a function and then we are just calling it to make life easier, to make our code shorter. Okay, so let's run this and see if it will work. There's a logic something that's I want to, also bring the net income into this. Let's see if it works. Option 1, let's say 1,000. Good, it worked. Your salary is 1,000, your taxable amount is 200, your net income is 800. So let's try option 2. Net income 800. Your net income is 800, your salary is 1,000. Yeah, good, it worked. Okay, now this is more of a logic something. So just go through, you are going to understand it. But what I want you to get is that, assuming the tax computation was very complex, okay, then it means we have to repeat that long complex code, which wouldn't be much of a benefit to us. Rather, we could just place it inside our computers, then just only repeat one simple code here. So on this note, even within the same thing, we have added a default value, okay, meaning, wait, I don't think it's worked. No, the second one didn't work. Sorry. Let's have a look at it. Yeah, cause I knew it didn't work. Cause I am supposed to. Okay, so I think to make it work, okay, we need to probably do net income is equal to net income. Okay, that's user. Let me do user net income so you see difference. User net income, though this is right, but because I'm teaching you, I want to name the variable different so that you can see clearly. Yeah, so so it will be net income plus tax amount. Let's rather try keyword arguments to see. Okay, so user net income is equal to, okay. So income plus tax amount would give us our salary. Okay. Okay. Now let's run this and see. Let's run this and see. So to 800. Okay, so user salary should have a default value of 0. Then now let's run it again and see. 2. So let's say 800. Good. Your net income is 800, your salary is 1000, your tax amount is 200. So I hope it's clear. Instead of us having, bulky code here, bulky code here, trust me, assuming we are doing a graduating rate, it would have been bulky codes on both ends, but we can have a single code here. Then we are done. So that's the purpose of functions.